Alright, so the YC Onion Hot Dog 3.0 is probably the best slider that you shouldn't get. Wait, no. How's it going, guys? My name is Andrew Murphy from Down Under in Gold Coast, Australia. So motorized sliders, or just sliders in general, are a very handy piece of equipment to have to get super smooth movements that can be like replicated multiple times over. And again, YC Onion has come out with the weirdest sounding products. So the slider itself is called the YC Onion Hot Dog 3.0. And then the actual like motorized module that goes on it is called the YC Onion BUN. Now, full disclosure, YC Onion did send over this product for me to review. However, my thoughts on this are my own. They haven't paid me or asked me to say anything. So everything in here is my own opinions, and that is it. So this thing has a ton of different features that I'll run through and can be used in like so many different ways. Plus, it is strong as hell. Like, I had my Canon C70 on it with a monitor, with a cinema lens, with a microphone, with a matte box on it, and it was traveling basically vertical. And I realized after that I was shooting that I actually forgot to unscrew the locking tab, and it still managed to lift the whole thing pretty smoothly. Like, if you look at this clip, you can actually genuinely see like my surprise as I'm looking. I'm like, how is this even possible? Now, real quick, if you do find this video helpful, then be sure to subscribe to the channel and share this content around with other creators that you know, so we can start growing this community even more. So the YC Onion Hot Dog 3.0 is a silent motorized slider that utilizes carbon fiber aviation aluminium, making it lighter and easier to carry. So it's actually only weighs about 2 kilograms, which is really, really cool. And it has these rosette support legs, making it super easy to quickly set it up and down and put it on surfaces as well. And it also supports either 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch threads to actually mount anything on the plate itself. It can support cameras up to 22 pounds or 10 kilograms horizontally, has this awesome 120-degree panoramic rail on it, which I'll actually touch on a little bit later, and it allows you to use either the slider with the BUN motor attachment or just by itself manually. And the standout feature would have to be that you can actually pair it with a bunch of different gimbals to not only get like that horizontal sliding movement, but then you can use the gimbal to get like your pan, tilt, and roll all at the same time. Right, now first impressions of this thing, I was honestly blown away by how light it was, and actually just like the quality of the build. Because like usually when I get like, or when lesser known brands release products, like I set my expectations a little bit lower just because like of how cheap they actually are. But this thing, freaking solid. Using it manually is super smooth and easy to adjust. And I actually got the 80 centimeter version, which I think it's like almost the perfect size because it's not too small that you actually like don't really see the movement, and it's only slightly too big for my liking to be like carrying around. But it does come in 4 different sizes, so 60, 80, 100, and 120 centimeters. So you can really get one that kind of suits your shooting style and your needs. And then adding on the YC Onion BUN motorized module is super simple. So they've got basically 2 screws to attach the module to the center plate, and then they've got like these little magnetic clips on the end of the actual cable that you can quickly clip in and then just adjust it with an Allen key. And it's like, it's super smooth with the actual motorized module on as well. The only thing I noticed with the motorized module is that it ramps up to the speed, and when it starts ramping, it can be a little bit jittery, but once it actually gets into the motion, it's like super smooth. So now how we get this set up is actually pretty straightforward. So we just need to install an MPF battery into that BUN module, and it actually fits really snug. Like, I love design choices like this where it almost looks like it should be part of it. It just works so good. Then we need to unlock the stopper, which I always forget to do. Then we hold the power button to turn it on, and we'll start with the setup without using the actual app itself, and then I'll actually go into the app a little bit later on. So we first have to set our A point by holding onto the A button until we have it where we want it to actually be. And also keep in mind that the A point must be on the left side of the slider. Once we get into actually using the app, I'll show you why this is. Then we just press on the dial and it will set the A point, and then we hold on the B button and then I'll move it to the right to set the B point. And this can be anywhere you want on the slider. So the benefit of having like a big range or a bigger slider is that you can do small movements or big movements or whatever you want. Then once we get to the B point, we press the dial again to set that B point, and then we press the dial one more time and it goes into video mode. Now, to adjust the speed, all we have to do is actually just twist the dial. And honestly, this is something that could be improved. So if we try to crank the dial too fast, it doesn't always actually like recognize the direction of the, like you're actually like twisting it in. So you have to like twist it a little bit slower, which can take a little bit more time. Now pressing the dial itself will actually pause or resume the motion once you actually start the slide, and then you can either press the A or B button depending on which direction you want to go. Now by default, the slider will be in the once mode, which basically means that if you press the A or B, it'll go to that point and then it will stop. But to switch it to cycle mode, which means that it's going to keep just infinitely looping, we just press the power button once and we can see it changes to cycle mode on the screen. So now when we press either A or B, it'll go to that point and then it will go back and it'll just keep going basically until we stop it. Now before we do actually get into the app and adding on the gimbal, let's just chat about the sound and this panoramic arm. So the Hot Dog 3.0 does make sound, but it is honestly very quiet compared to other sliders that I've actually used. And it's going to be the loudest at 100% speed, but by the time you stop it down to about 50% speed, it's basically silent. So if you were going to use this slider on say like an interview, then you'd set it to just 50% speed or anything lower than that. And then it basically gets rid of all the noise completely. Okay, so this is recorded using a mic on the actual camera itself. The slider is about 1 meter away, and this is how loud it is. So this is at 100% speed, but if I slow it down to 50%, this is now at 50% speed. So it's basically dead quiet at 50% speed. And what's super cool is that the motor actually goes down to 1% speed, which means that you can use it for time lapses as well. And even like at 1% speed when it's moving super duper slow, it's still super smooth. Now this panorama arm is honestly a feature that I hope that a lot of slider manufacturers actually start implementing into their products, because it just adds so much more variety to your shots without really making anything too complex. Because it's basically just a rod with some bearings on it, and you basically it just twists the middle plate. But what it does is, as it basically slides, it allows you to get a panning movement as well as that horizontal slide. So you just have to unscrew these knobs and then actually adjust the angles, and you can either have the camera basically pan left or right throughout the movement depending on how you set it up. And because it's on rollers, the panning movement is super smooth, and again, it's powered by the horizontal movement of the slider itself. So even if you're just using the slider without a gimbal, you can still get amazing sliding shots with that panning motion as well. But now the most amazing feature, and I think the one that most people are like excited about this slider for, is that you can grab your gimbal and basically attach it onto the slider and sync the two together and just get crazy shots. Now I do have to say, I had a pretty hard time getting this process to work properly, and I was chatting with the YC Onion support team to actually figure out what was going wrong. And it turned out that the firmware on my Crane 2S was out of date, and it was causing a ton of issues. So before using this, if you do get it, make sure to update your gimbal, update the YC Onion app, and also the firmware on the slider as well to whatever the latest is that's available. In saying that though, I still haven't been able to get it to work like really good with my Weeble S, but my Crane 2S seemed to work fine. But I have seen a lot of other people using it with the Weeble S, so I don't know exactly what's going on there. Now, one thing I would have loved to have seen is an adjustment on the actual base plate, because once you actually screw down your gimbal, sometimes it doesn't sit 100% straight, which isn't that big of a deal, but it would be nice to obviously align the back of the actual gimbal with the motor module itself, just to keep everything out of the way. So once the gimbal is actually mounted, you just power on the gimbal and the slider, and then we launch the YC Onion app, and we can search for the products that we actually own and we want to use. Now, from what I can tell, I'm pretty sure you can sync up a slider and a gimbal, but you can also sync up the YC Onion light, and I think they have a ball head as well that you can potentially use. Now, if we go back to the home screen of the app, we just tap and hold on the actual slider module, and then we tap on the actual gimbal that we want to use, and down the bottom, we just press the enter interlink mode button, and we can get started. From here, we set the A point on the slider, but remember that the A point must be on the left side of the slider, because if we try to set it on the right side, then the B point on the left side, it basically starts from the A point and moves right anyway. So just remember to put the A point on the left side, and it tells you in the app as well. Once we set the A point, we then get this screen which allows us to control the slider and also the gimbal. Now, firstly, we need to set the starting gimbal position before we actually move the slider to that second point. And keep in mind as well that the gimbal needs to be in lock mode for all this to work. So once we've got got our gimbal into the start point, we then press the plus icon and that'll set an actual like position for the gimbal. Now we can move to the next point and change our gimbal position basically as many times as we want between the A and B point, and just keep pressing that plus actual icon. And then when we're at the B point, we just need to press the set B point, and then we're ready to go. And now we can enter either our video or time-lapse mode, and then we can actually start the movement. Oh, and I almost forgot as well, it has a shutter cable attachment on the actual module, the bun module itself. So if you're gonna do like time lapses and stuff, I believe you can get a cable that goes from that to your camera. And as well as doing the slider, it'll actually trigger your camera to take the photos and all that kind of stuff as well. Here we can set the speed of the slider, and actually gives us like an estimated time for the entire slide itself. So obviously the slower we make it, the longer it's gonna take to complete. And we can also toggle on the cycle mode as well to get that like looping continuously motion. Now, if we start, we can see that the slider is moving as well as the gimbal at the same time. Now, one little annoying thing about the app is that, say if I've set up the whole motion or the slide and the gimbal movements and stuff, and then I wanted to quickly change, say, just one of the gimbal movements. Unfortunately, at this point in time, you can't just go back and update just that. You have to start from scratch. So I'm hoping that with firmware updates in the future, they'll allow you to kind of like go back and adjust a few things instead of having to start again. Now, this is where things start to get a little bit interesting, because there are some limitations to what you can actually do with this, because it's obviously controlling a third-party device at the same time as itself. The first thing I notice is that the gimbal can sometimes lag behind the movement of the slider, and the starting of the actual gimbal can sometimes be like a little bit jerky. So if you're wanting to say like replicate a shot over and over again with the exact same movement, then it may not line up 100% of the time, every time. The second thing is that when you're trying to do like small slider movements, the gimbal sometimes goes out of sync with the slides. So I'd recommend keeping your slider movements to like at least half the length of the slider if you're gonna use it in conjunction with the gimbal. But with all this in mind, there is currently no other slider on the market that I know of anyway that can sync a gimbal to the slider. So props to YC Onion for actually like taking the leap and making this happen. And with more and more firmware updates and research, it's only gonna get better and better from here. And also a massive shout out to the YC Onion support team, because they've actually been amazing with just like answering questions and getting back to me really quick when I have had problems trying to like set all this up. So overall, I'm actually a huge fan of this motorized slider, even though like the gimbal and the slider together aren't 100% perfect. It's a hell of a lot cheaper than buying a slider with a pan, tilt and roll head module. That is for sure. And for $389 US for the 80 centimeter version with the motorized module, I think it's an absolutely amazing deal. Anyway guys, if you did enjoy this one, then consider liking and subscribing. And if you want to find out more about the YC Onion Hot Dog 3.0, then I'll leave some links down below. And as always, stay creative and just be you. Have fun.